Our story begins with some Greek boys and some cockroaches. I mean Turks. The Byzantines get a little scared by the Turks taking over most of their Asian holdings, so they go to the Pope. Hey, Mr. Pope man, could you help us out with the Turks? And why would I help a heretic like you? They're Muslims, and they took the Holy Land. And so, the Pope gathered up a bunch of French and German knights and went on a crusade, destroying more Christian communities along the way than Muslim soldiers. But they did it! They took back the Holy Land. Huh? That wasn't a point? What on God's green earth is a Byzantium? After they were done, some crusaders were like, Hans, that was fun. Let's do it again! Now that they beat up the Muslims, what are they gonna do next? Maybe help the Greeks take back the easy to conquer Anatolia? Nonsense. Let's go north, kick out some pagans from the swamps and forests in the winter. I'm sure it will go just fine. Against all odds, it actually went well for one of the groups sent there, calling themselves the Teutonic Knights. They were loyal to the Holy Roman Emperor and were sent there by the Kingdom of Poland. So the two of them were really good friends, until they weren't. One incident in particular really soured up the relations between the two. Since Poland was on the border of the Holy Roman Empire, it was completely possible that one of the member states could, in theory, conquer land from Poland in theory, and it would come under the jurisdiction of the Emperor in theory. And it actually happened one time when Brandenburg took the city of Danzig and the Poles asked the knights to take it back for them. Hey, it's nice that you took back our city from Brandenburg and all, but can we have it back? Nah. And so they kept the city, landlocking Poland. At this point in time, the actual Prussians, you know, the people living in the area of Prussia, including Danzig, most of which were a mix of Germans, Slavs, and whatever else, got a bit discontent with the Teutonic rule. And by a bit I mean they literally formed a confederation, pledged allegiance to Poland, and declared independence. Now the Prussians were independent. Except it's only the western half of Prussia. Except they got integrated into Poland instantly. So no Prussia yet. Fast forward to the 1500s, a guy from the von Hohenzollern family gets selected to be the leader of the Teutonic Order, family which just so happens to be ruling the Kingdom of Brandenburg. And this guy was also the nephew of the King of Poland, which he did fight for a bit, but they agreed to cease fire because of the Turks invading most of the Balkans. Our good guy Albrecht von Hohenzollern travels to the Emperor to discuss the solution to the Turkish problem in Europe, but on his way he meets Martin. Martin got drunk one night and wrote a critique of the Catholic Church. Martin started the Protestant Reformation. Albrecht likes Martin. The Emperor and the Pope don't like Martin, so neither do the Knights. But I think it's quite clear most Prussians don't like the Knights. So Protestant guy Albrecht converts the entire country to Protestantism and no one can really stop him. And now the Duchy of Prussia is formed. Not the kingdom, they're too small for that. Skipping over the 30 Years' War, just because that thing was a dumpster fire in its own right, Prussia finds itself in an interesting situation. It is ruled by the King of Brandenburg, which is a subject of the Holy Roman Empire, but the duchy itself is a subject of Poland. Poland, kinda tired of the endless war, decided to let this one slide and leave them alone. So now the King of Brandenburg is the king in Prussia. Why? Well, because the King of Poland is the King of Prussia, and the people of the HRE can only have one king, which is the King of the Romans, also known as the Emperor. Confused yet? Good. Anyway, this weirdo calling himself King Friedrich wants to make Brandenburg Prussia the Eastern European version of the Netherlands. Spoilers, it doesn't work and he dies. His successor is Friedrich I. Why? Well, because the first one didn't have a number. See? Logic. Anyway, the guy is pretty damn good at ruling a country. He funds schools, pays debts, and invites Protestants to come over, since the nation didn't really recover after the 30 Years' War. And then he dies. Our next leader on the list is Frederick the Great. This dude inherited the fourth largest army in Europe. And what did he do? Hans, we need a bigger army! And so he grew the army by about 100,000 soldiers. Now, while certain other nations with Russia in their name might throw peasants with guns in battle and call it a day, these were soldiers. They had strategy, tactics, morale, and discipline so good, some guy calling himself Voltaire named them an army with a stake. But there's no time for that now, since a woman just inherited the Austrian throne. And we can't have that, can we? So Fred goes over to Austria.
¿Quieres?
So after a quick war with the Austrians, Fred now has Silesia. 2 years later, he does it again. Why? Well, what if the Austrians wanted Silesia back? So, after steamrolling the Habsburgs twice, you think that'd be enough? Well, one morning after finishing his daily mug of Austrian tears, he decides to attack Saxony, to take their men and money to make sure the Habsburgs don't take back Silesia. The Habsburgs actually intervene this one, and then France intervenes, and then Britain comes around because they're friends with Prussia, but then Russia joins in because there's an imbalance of power, and here we have the 7 Years' War. Now, while Prussia is quite good at wiping out armies off the face of the earth, they aren't really good at waging long wars. The Russians actually took Prussia at one point, but the king just gives it back since he actually likes the Prussians and the last one just died. In the end, both Prussia and Austria decided no borders will change, so this earlier attempt at a world war resulted in nothing. Sometime later, Fred goes to Maria Theresa, the ruler of Austria. Yes, even after 3 wars and several succession crises. Do you want from me? I promise I won't take Silesia. Please, can we not have a 4th war? I actually wanted to tell you that we're partitioning Poland. So Austria, Prussia and Russia each take a bite of Poland, and Fred can finally call himself the King of Prussia. After a life of successful campaigns, making the army the best it can be, and spitting in the face of half a continent, Fred finally died in 1786. As the new century dawned, so did the new age for Prussia. The new king, also named Friedrich, was not really that great. He had no real gain from war, and he didn't put much emphasis on his military. This wouldn't be too much of a problem, if not for a little known Corsican general crowned emperor over the Franks. Just as a fun fact, it took 7 coalitions to finally stop this guy. So you can imagine the Prussians got their teeth kicked in this one. After the wars, the Holy Roman Empire was no more. Europe had been changed forever, and Prussia will never rise to its former glory. Until about 50 years later, when one chancellor of Wilhelm I decided that it would be about time the Germans united under one nation, one empire, responding to one central authority and no more feudalism, no more puny land disputes between families. In 6 years they curbstoned the Danish, beat up on the Austrians just a bit more for good measure, and captured the King of France to make him proclaim Wilhelm the Kaiser of the German people, or Emperor in English. And here our story ends. Wilhelm I dies in the following years, and Otto von Bismarck is dismissed from the royal court, stating that the new emperor will not last more than 30 years.